Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle with your host, Kilu Nyasha, and board hopping is Andrew Montoya. My guests today are housing activists Paul Boden and Tommi uh,
Aviolli.
Aviolli Mecca. But before I introduce them more properly, I want to share with you a commentary I wrote to address the latest happenings. For the first time in nearly 45 years, I'm really excited about young people rising up all over the country in the wake of police murders of black and brown people, especially the blatant killings of Michael Brown and Eric Garner. In those cases, neither of the road cops was indicted or had any charges filed against him. As a former Panther, police brutality and murder is nothing new. From Ferguson, Missouri, where Michael Brown was left to bleed to death for 4.5 hours, to New York City, where Eric Garner was choked to death, black youth have been in the forefront of a mass movement taking to the streets. In solidarity with blacks who've been the most targeted by racist police, people of all backgrounds and ages are collectively protesting this open season on black people. In solidarity, tens of thousands took to the streets last Saturday in New York City in a millions march organized by black youth. They carried signs saying, "Black Lives Matter," "I can't breathe," "No justice, no peace," and shouted, "Eric Garner, Michael Brown, shut it down, shut it down." On Monday morning in Oakland, in an amazing display of ethnic solidarity, a black-led direct action with Asians and whites disrupted business as usual. Blacks carried a banner, "Black and Breathing," and in a well-strategized action, the groups blockaded the Oakland police headquarters and shut down a nearby freeway entrance, demanding an immediate end to the war on black people. Organizers reached their goal of maintaining the blockades for 4 hours and 28 minutes, the time Michael Brown's body lay in the streets of Ferguson after he was killed by a cop. The 28 minutes was to highlight the fact that every 28 hours, a black person is killed by police, security, or vigilantes in America. The allies in solidarity with the organizations Black Lives Matter and Blackout Collective were Asians for Black Lives and the mostly white Bay Area Solidarity Action Team, who helped organize Monday's action. At least 27 people were arrested in the planned civil disobedience, and thanks to much support, they've all been released. During the action, the youth read out the names of individuals murdered by law enforcement agents and articulated their demands, which included some of the same demands of the Panthers' 10-point program, such as, "We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings," and "We want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black, brown, and all oppressed people." In their vision for a new America, they declared, "We want justice for Michael Brown. We want freedom for our communities. We want an end to all forms of discrimination and the full recognition of our human rights. The United States government must acknowledge and address the structural and institutional discrimination that continues to imprison our communities, either in a life of poverty and or one behind bars. We want the United States government to recognize the full spectrum of our human rights and its obligations under international law." They continue with national demands that include the demilitarization of local law enforcement across the country and a comprehensive review of systemic abuses by local police departments. The full document can be found on the net. Together, the impact of their solidarity was powerful, successful, and unifying. A revolutionary example we need to advance and expand upon as we encourage and support this renewed movement for change. And with that, I'm going to move to interview our wonderful guests, very active in the struggle. First, I'll introduce Tommi Aviolli Mecca, a longtime tenants' rights affordable housing advocate who has worked for the Housing Rights Committee for the past 14 years. He is currently working with the San Francisco Community Land Trust on reopening Marty's Place, a residence for people with AIDS, as a co-op for low-income people with AIDS. He believes housing is a human right, not a commodity. Paul Boden, organizing director of WRAP, Western Regional Advocacy Project, became homeless at the age of 16. He began volunteering at a drop-in shelter in San Francisco in 1983, eventually becoming a program director there. He then worked as a case manager in a supportive hotel program for mentally ill people. Paul served as executive director of San Francisco's Coalition on Homelessness for 16 years and was a founder of the Community Housing Partnership, a nationally recognized permanent housing corporation with optional supportive services. Launched just last month, WRAP's newest publication, House Keys Not Handcuffs, Homeless Organizing, Art and Politics in San Francisco and Beyond, with essays by Paul Boden, Art Hazelwood, and Bob Prentice. The book is a reflection of over 30 years of homeless organizing in San Francisco. Its purpose is not only to distill the lessons we have learned, but to encourage others to document and reflect on their own experiences in the hope that we can collectively contribute to a stronger, more broadly based movement. Welcome, Paul and Tommi. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you.
And you're here for the first time.
Yes.
And Paul, you've
Hey,
been
Keelu.
Interviewed by me going back
Couple
25
times.
years on radio.
Yeah.
So it's really good to have you back and to be able to talk to you again about this very urgent and very important subject, homelessness.
Yeah, and it's an amazing time to be here. With what's happening out in the streets, with what is, a opportunity where people are saying we're going to unite and we ain't going to take it no more.
Right.
We're not going to have small little bands of different things going on around different issues. We're all coming together and talking about human rights, talking about social justice,
Yes.
and fighting for those things.
Yes.
And the voice is loud. The energy is incredible.
It's
And
exciting.
it's affecting, young kids, but it's affecting everybody. It's across the board. And when we win, we'll have one for everybody.
Yes.
So thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. And Tommi, talk about housing rights or committee.
Well, I mean, right now we're in the midst of a housing crisis, as you know, here in San Francisco. Rents are astronomically high. People are being evicted left and right. Displacement's happening. Whole neighborhoods are changing or becoming upscale. Poor and working class people are being driven out of the city in huge droves. But as Paul was saying, in the midst of all this, we have a resistance that is happening that is amazing. Tenants are fighting back. When they're getting their notices, a lot of tenants are saying, no, we're not leaving. And they're fighting. They're
Good.
organizing. We have done actions where we've gone to the offices of some of these speculators who are buying these properties and flipping them. We've gone there. We've invaded their offices. We've gone to their homes. At one point, we went down to Atherton, to this gated community where these rich speculators live, and they were buying this building where this guy with AIDS lived. He had lived in his home for like 20 years, and they were evicting him. And
Right.
he had nowhere to go. He lived on a fixed income, and we went down to where they visit them in their home, and we leafleted all their neighbors and let their neighbors know that he was evicting this senior with AIDS. And so the tactics have changed slightly from what they used to be in the housing movement. We are doing more direct actions, which I think is really necessary. We have to shame these people. I was involved with ACT UP back in the 80s, and that was one of our tactics. You shame them. When people
Right.
are doing something wrong, you shame them publicly and try to hold them accountable. And that's what we're doing. And in some cases, we've won. Some of these speculators are withdrawing the Ellis Act evictions.
Oh, can you
yeah.
give us an example?
There was an example. Benito Santiago, who lives on Debos. He and his neighbors united and got together with tenant activists and started doing all these actions, including invading the real estate office of the speculator. And the guy eventually withdrew, and now the building, the tenants are trying to organize into a community land trust so that they can preserve their housing.
And about how many units are in that building?
It's 4 units.
All right.
Yeah, so it's a small building, but
They preserve those units.
but you
and
preserve those units, and the land trust is an amazing tool we have for
And
preserving the housing.
Explain what that is.
Community Land Trust is a nonprofit that buys the land, owns the land, and then the building itself is run by the tenants. It becomes a co-op. So the land is basically taken off of the market, so it can't be speculated on. It can't be bought by somebody. It's basically off the land, and to my way of thinking, it's the best model because we literally have to take the land away from them. Because the reality is, this land has been stolen from all of us. Number one, it was stolen from the native peoples.
Of course.
But this land does not belong to the real estate people, and
Right.
I will never, ever give it to them. They don't own it. They never did. They stole it, and now we need to take it back from them. So the whole idea of a land trust is that's what the land trust does basically. The land trust takes the land, and then the people who are living on it get to run it. They get to own it and to run it as a co-op. And that's what we're doing with Marty's Place, for example, which is this residence in the Mission in Old Victorian that this priest, he came to San Francisco to take care of his brother who was dying of AIDS. He ended up staying here for 20 years. He acquired this property in the Mission. When he died, he left it to Dolores Street Community Services. They found that they could not reopen it because the current model right now is that if you reopen it with city money, you have to bring it up to code. So it would have cost about $1 million to reopen it with city money. We're doing it without city money, and it's going to cost a lot less than that. But we're going to reopen it as a co-op for people with AIDS.
Right.
And we're hoping that a lot of young people in particular will be able to bring into it. And those folks will run the housing. It will be off the market forever, and it will be affordable housing forever. And if somebody decides to leave the co-op, somebody else comes in and takes their place. And so it's...
So how, if somebody wanted to set up a co-op similar to what you just described,
Right.
how would they go about it?
Call the Community Land Trust. Google San Francisco Community Land Trust. Get in touch with them, and they can walk them through the steps and help them.
And the land trust itself, is that legal? I mean,
Yeah.
It's grounded
Absolutely.
in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's
a
model
little
that a
bit
lot of people don't
confusing
know
to me.
about.
You can decommodify land
Yes.
and still have it be legal, believe it or not. You wouldn't think America would support something like that, but apparently you can do it.
Oh.
And there are other models of
Yes.
developing and preserving housing for everybody in a community. You know, it's the privatization of the housing that makes it so damn expensive. And it's the mortgage interest deduction programs that incentivize making it more expensive because of the tax write-offs and the tax benefits to mortgage companies and real estate speculators and real estate interests and construction companies.
Yeah.
So, you know, this whole concept that housing is about making a profit for somebody. It's not about giving people a decent place to live in their communities. It's about making a profit for a company or a rich speculator. And there's other ways of approaching housing. The
same
way we should be approaching education. The
And
same way we
healthcare.
should be approaching healthcare.
Right.
Like we have a government right now, and this is not just right now, we have a capitalist system that is killing itself with greed
Yes.
and with power.
This thing that
and-
must expand. To
And so
live.
we
Yeah.
keep having to militarize our police. We keep shooting people for selling loose freaking cigarettes, making it illegal to feed and share food with people, making it illegal for some folks to sit down or lay down.
No
You know,
sit
RAP's
lie
campaign
laws.
is like,
Unbelievable.
well, and it's amazing in the concept that just like everyone is going to sleep, everyone is going to sit down. Everyone is going to eat. You're going to do those things. How then
And
can we
everyone has
pass
to relieve
laws
themselves.
that say it's illegal to do these things when we
Exactly.
know damn well in advance everyone's going to do it because we have a target population of who we're going to enforce it against? Young people of color, mentally ill people, poor people, and homeless people, and day laborers, and anybody that isn't generating a profit for somebody. You can sit all you want if you're doing it in a cafe out on the street and making little parklets out of our streets. So long as you buying something, you can sit all you want.
That's
As
right.
soon as you ain't a commodity for somebody to make money off of, your mere existence is illegal. And so to privatize our housing, to incentivize displacing us from our places of towns and communities that we live in, even changing our neighborhoods and now calling them business improvement districts. We used to call those our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and all of a sudden the neighborhood is now a community benefit district or a business improvement district.
my goodness.
Business improvement district.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Oh hell yeah! And they're getting off-duty cops have armed and fully authorized to enforce laws that work off-duty in their car with their uniforms on, paid for with property tax dollars that the business community is allowed to collect, to enforce making sure no one, well, not certain people, sit down on the sidewalk or eat or go to the bathroom or sleep or, God forbid, be in a park if it's after hours. They literally are taking over our communities, and the kind of demonstrations that we're seeing right now, the inevitable result of militarizing the police department is the police are going to shoot people. And they're not going to go to Atherton and shoot the guy in the gated community for displacing a dying man from his home. They're going to shoot us. And that's the bottom line. And we need to be real about it. And people are being real about it. And they're saying, hell no, we're not going to take it no more. It's an incredible response, an appropriate response.
Tens of thousands in New York.
And doing it with
all over the
art,
country.
doing it with music, doing it with street theater, you know, doing it by building power. What we talk about a lot in this book that we just put out as a fundraiser for our organization, you know, is building power through being inclusive of everybody in the community.
Exactly.
The artists
Oh,
play a role.
gosh,
The
it's
legal community
wonderful to
plays
see
a
it
role.
happening
You know,
and alive.
those that want to share food play a role. Those that want to squat play a role. Those that want to
Yes.
do land trust play a role.
Yes.
We all play a role when we operate from a perspective of social justice,
Exactly.
because we're operating from the heart.
For real.
You know, this isn't an intellectual masturbation.
No,
this is
about loving
actual
people, really.
heartfelt,
Loving
and
ourselves, loving our people, loving poor people,
visceral.
and
It's visceral.
and taking care of business. I mean, and no business as usual. And that's what I love about these youngsters. They're into no business as usual, and they're picking up this ball this torch that we've been struggling to pass on for almost 50 years, and they're running with it, and it's wonderful to see. It's so, these are our grandkids, you know, not yours, but mine for sure.
Well, my grandnieces.
Oh, you have grandnieces. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah, and
so
they're
you
out
can-
there
so
stirring
they
it
are
up
our
in New York and
grandchildren,
stuff.
Our collective
Hell yeah.
grandchildren, and it's wonderful to see them rising up.
Yep.
Because you know the revolution kind of skipped a generation, and I think it's going to pick up and
Well, I think the revolution had to overcome the war on poverty. You know, like the government got scared of a revolution, so they did what governments do. They funded it.
I know.
You know,
I
and
know, I
you
worked
look at,
for
you know,
them.
all of a sudden 501c3 nonprofit status,
I
you can't
know.
do systemic change.
Exactly.
Foundations changing their mind every 6 months what kind of activity they want to
Right.
fund, as if our lives change every 6 months.
Right.
You know, we're up against systemic oppression, and we're doing quantitative and qualitative budget reports for foundations because the foundations are making money. United Way is a manifestation of neoliberal economic politics.
Yeah.
You know, and so you fund the revolution and you shut people the hell up. And now we're saying you ain't funding us. You know, buy a book.
That's
That'll
so-
fund the revolution.
That's so true.
You know, and
Yeah.
to stop saying, okay, you know, homelessness is the best example. I mean, in the early 80s, Hospitality House, where I came off the street, that had been around since the 60s.
I remember
And
hospitality,
in
yeah.
82, beginning of 83, but the end of 82, all of a sudden the people that had been going in and out of that organization for years had nowhere to go when they left at night. And so Hospitality House said, oh, I guess crash here. You're a neighbor. This is a neighborhood center. I guess crash here. And within just a few short years, Feinstein started funding shelters. And all of a sudden you had to be an expert to run a shelter. And shelters had to have rules. And shelters had to do intakes. And now they do finger imaging. It's all about control. And we've lost more affordable housing units since the advent of contemporary homelessness than we had lost the 10 years prior to that, because we continue to dismantle affordable housing funding, which has a ripple effect. Hope 6 gentrified the whole areas around where
explain
public
to
housing
our
used to
viewers
be.
what Hope 6 was.
It's just a typical liberal Democrat BS response to how we're going to improve the living conditions in public housing. We're not going to increase the funding for public housing. We're going to tear the public housing down that exists and make new, improved public housing units for mixed income communities.
Oh yeah, we know.
And Clinton straight up said it's good for poor people to live next door to people that aren't poor, so they have a role model to look up to. How freaking insulting can you possibly get in terms of talking about a community
I'm
of people?
poor and been poor all my life. It's very insulting.
Well, and standing next to somebody who isn't poor isn't exactly creating a role model for me when that person that isn't poor is screwing over my neighbors and my friends that happen to be poor in order to not be poor.
Exactly.
So it was just that it decreased the number of units available to poor people. It decreased the affordability of what units were available to poor people, and it put thousands of people out on the street, and yet they were the ones that were blamed because of one strike, or because they had a felony conviction, or because they were caught letting their aunt sleep on the couch because she had been displaced from her unit.
I know.
You know, these are all
And
actual examples.
Those houses, I live in public housing, and I've been in the Pingyue North building, a 12-story high-rise building in Chinatown, North Beach, and I've been in that building for 34 years. And do you know how much it angers me not to be able to for them to tell me that I can't have a guest or
And
someone stay, and I'm disabled and a senior, and I can't have somebody stay with me for more than 14 days.
And
I've
yet
been there
if
34 years paying rent for 34 years.
And yet,
Please.
if people own the unit and they're getting a housing subsidy, because a tax write-off is a housing subsidy, we do $144 billion a year subsidizing the housing of homeowners. No one tells them who can sleep in their house. No one checks felony background checks. No one does one strike. No one does those things because it's economic incentive. It's economic stimulus. It's considered economic stimulus. Now, to me, a housing subsidy is a housing subsidy. If you owe me $50 and I tell you to keep it, I just gave you $50. So
Right.
a tax write-off is the same thing as a direct payment.
Exactly.
It's the same exact thing,
That's
but
a
yet
good point,
poor
Paul. I hadn't
people
thought of that.
and their housing is treated at $34 billion a year of you have to be worthy for this. This is charity. And then let me see, are you blue-eyed, green-eyed? Because we're only housing green-eyed people this week.
Right.
That's how they treat $34 billion. But the other housing program, $144 billion, has no limit on it. It can go as high as it goes. It's a tax write-off. It's administered by the IRS.
Wow.
There's absolutely no limit on how much money we're willing to invest in home ownership. 75% of this money goes to households earning over $100,000 a year. And that's not charity. There's no questions about can we afford it or not. And there's no equity in terms of housing is a benefit. Housing
And
is good.
Actually, I don't consider it a charity anyway.
It
Being
ain't a charity.
subsidized, because I'm still paying 1/3 of my income, no matter what it is. I'm paying 1/3 of my income. When I was a young woman, rent was about 1/4 of your income. A working class person, I paid about 1/4 of my income
Mm-hmm.
for rent. When I was coming along in the late, I started working in 57, and I was in New York City working from 1950. I went back to New York, and I'm for almost 10 years or something, and living in New York. And let me fast forward.
From
I was-
57, you're going to have to go real fast.
real fast to 1971, and I was back out here, and I found an apartment on McAllister, in the 1700 block of McAllister. I paid $110 a month for a carpeted 2-bedroom apartment in a nice building. It was a 4th floor walk up, so obviously I was able-bodied. But I paid $110 a month. I looked in Craigslist ads, and in just a couple of blocks from that, in the 1300 block of McAllister, there was a 2-bedroom for $3,600.
Yeah.
From 110 to 3,600. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, 30 something years. No, that's more than that. It's over 40, 45.
40.
Yes.
Ain't none of us teaching math.
Me, I'm the worst. But anyway, but think about that.
But I mean, that's
it's
where.
unbelievable.
And Tommy knows this stuff. You respond.
Well, there's an old saying that rent is theft. Well,
It is.
It really is. I mean, and especially these days, there's $10,000 apartments in the Mission.
Are you kidding me?
2-bedroom apartments. In the Castro, there's $8,500 apartments. Across the
Oh
street
my
from
goodness.
where I live in the Castro. Across the street from where I live, $4,200 for a 2-bedroom apartment. And they're tiny. I mean, these are tiny little
I know. We used to have space.
It is absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely theft. There's no exaggeration in that statement.
No.
There's no reason in the world why anybody should have to pay that much for.
And then you've got corporations like Twitter and stuff moving in here and tax-free.
Right.
Well, and that's where, and then you end up with homelessness as a fabric in your community, but yet people turn around and blame the homeless people for the fact that homelessness exists. And
I
it
know.
kind of, like when you start looking at the incredible funding cuts to affordable housing, the gentrification of our community, and gentrification, rap is in Portland, we're in Seattle, we're in Denver, we're in Oakland, we're in Sacramento. It's across the board.
Paul,
And that's where these demos right now, from Ferguson to LA to New York to Chicago, like that's where we have to keep those connections strong.
Right.
We have to show that linkage because
Are you in Detroit yet?
not yet. We don't have a member
That's a
group
tough
in
one.
Detroit yet. No,
Yeah.
it ain't for lack of
I know.
willingness to go there.
I
But,
heard that. But
and
I-
the National Welfare Rights Union, obviously, is a big part of the People's Movement Assembly and the U.S. Social Forum, and we're connected through that way.
Right.
But in this particular House Keys Not Handcuffs campaign, we're still building that connection.
Okay, and explain to our viewers what rap is and who
Rap is a
per-
bunch of
members are.
Rap is a small core of organizations that really felt strongly that the social justice piece of homelessness wasn't resonating in Washington, D.C. or in the state capitals. It wasn't being repped in an accountable fashion. And the book talks about how to be accountable to community people when you're doing organizing or doing advocacy on their behalf. And that's where you have to do the street outreach, where you have to do the community forums. You have to document. You have to be able to say we with integrity. And so we've pulled together organizations that believe that live that concept, that
Right.
in order for us to have any credibility at all,
That's right.
we have to legitimately be able to use the word we in
Right.
talking about our community, which means
Yes.
we have to document what people tell us, not just remember who we agreed with, but document the actual experiences and the opinions of the people that you're talking about. So once you had that together as your core, then you want to create your voice. Then you have something legitimate to say. And that's where we use the artwork. That's where we did the without housing and the research around the connection between affordable housing cuts and the advent in '83 of homelessness again. And that's where we use the street theater and we use the dance and we make sure BLO is always playing at our stuff. That we want to build energy and we want to build a party atmosphere and make it safe for people who may not be legally in this country to come and be a part of something. You know, if you're gonna do squatting, you know, it best be that everybody that gets inside that building can afford to be arrested, can survive
It has to be a
and come
strategy.
out. It's not a fun experience, but it's a privilege to know that I can go to jail and get my butt out again and
Right.
not lose my
Exactly.
kids in the process. So it's that kind of strategizing and thinking through
Yeah.
approaches and everybody having a role to play.
That's what these young people did last Monday.
Well, and
They
yeah,
had a certain
they know
group
yeah,
got arrested,
yeah,
and
yeah.
others did not.
And it's really
They knew
clear. They know
exactly
exactly
what
what
they were
they're doing.
Oh,
They
yeah,
know-
that's why they
you
pulled
know,
it off
and
so
do it with a
successfully.
smile on your face.
And
what
you
the
know
hell?
what I love about that? Some of us has been preaching for years. Don't fight battles that you can't win. That's a Maoist concept. Fight no battles you don't think you can win. Fight only battles you think you can, at least think you can win. Because if you don't, then what happens is if you fight battles that you always lose, people are disempowered. They think that they can't win.
Well, but also though, I think maybe on the big picture, if in the term battle, we get into tons of skirmishes where we get our butts kicked. But if the hotel council is going to do an ad campaign saying don't give money to poor people, they'll just buy drugs with it, we're going to take them on, win or lose. Like, we are going to show that people are willing to fight, because if we fight consistently enough and righteously enough, eventually we'll start winning those battles. But I don't believe that it's always about winning in the moment. I think it's about testing yourself and pushing yourself and getting bigger and stronger and more together to win in the ultimate sense of the battle, the big battle.
And then sometimes you're surprised, because sometimes you think you're not going to be able to do it, but you can do it. I helped organize a building at 1049 Market. It's live work lofts, all artists, all working class, paying below market rents. A speculator bought the building and decided to evict everybody because he wanted to turn it back into commercial space and make lots of money from the tech industry. This is like right after Twitter got the tax break and moved into that area. In fact, Twitter's headquarters is 2 blocks from this building. So it was no coincidence that this speculator did this. And when I first started organizing the tenants, I had talked to some lawyers and some other people to try to get a sense of what they thought might be a useful legal strategy and all. And they all said to me, you can't win. This is a losing battle. The best you can get is, a little extra money for these people to move, and maybe a little more time for them to move. And I said, watch what we're going to do. So the tenants, agreed to go along with it. I sat with the tenants. I explained, look, this is probably a long shot, but here's some options. The tenants decided they wanted to fight. They didn't care. They were going to go down fighting. Well, we won. We stopped the evictions.
Good.
And
no, I fully support that.
Everybody was amazed. In fact,
I
was kind of surprised myself. But it's the power of, there's 80 units in that building. It's the power of all those people, all those artists. And as Paul said, they were artists, so they did art exhibits outside the building. When we had press conferences, they did all this amazing artwork and everything, and they made everything into an art show, into a performance, and it was great. And just the sheer defiance, the sheer stubbornness of these folks, and of course,
resistors,
just did it. And we employed the media. That's another thing we haven't talked about. The media has been really actually useful to us in these tenant battles lately.
Really?
Even though, I don't trust the media.
Not us.
but we found that, like with the Lee family eviction, an elderly Chinese family and their disabled daughter.
Yeah, I remember that.
The media was so helpful in shaming the mayor into calling that speculator and at least buying more time so we could get those folks into housing so they wouldn't become homeless. The media was great with that. So sometimes
they're good.
I will use anything I have to.
Well,
use.
listen, 7 on your side got me out of the medical prison system and into the Ping Yun. That's what I had to do.
If we
So
could use
it works.
It
When it
worked.
works, yeah.
Yeah, and we also used the media for. We had 3 Latina mothers being evicted from a single-family house. The landlord lost it through foreclosure. The bank took over. The bank decided to evict them. They had 7 kids between them. It was Calsa Justa and Housing Rights Committee, and we strategized, and we said, wait a minute, there's 7 kids living in this house. Let's get these kids off from school that day. Let's do a press conference in front of the bank, and let's have the kids present a letter in English and Spanish to the bank owner, pleading with the bank not to evict them and their families. We thought this is a golden, a photo op, and what media is not going to cover this? Well, we were right. I mean, the media just descended upon the corner of 16th and Mission, U.S. Bank, and it was right in the heart of the Mission. The mothers came, the kids were there.
Oh, beautiful.
And the kids went and they knocked on the window.
Yeah.
And the bank manager, in a very stupid move, started going, no, get away, go away, go away. She wouldn't even come to the door to talk to the kids. Well, the media, of course, the media was all over that. Because here are these little kids, adorable little kids, with these signs in English and Spanish, just wanting to present her with this letter, and she wouldn't even come to the door. Well, within 2 hours after we did the press conference, I get a call from the bank saying to me, "What are you talking about? We're not evicting these families." And I said, no, wait. I have a copy of an unlawful detainer here with your bank's name on it and your lawyer's name on it. And they said, "Oh, we're withdrawing that."
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
So they withdrew the eviction, and,
Yeah.
and we saved those families. But the media played an integral part in that.
Good. Yeah.
So-
the way you
Ignore
use it.
that man behind the curtain. The Wizard of Oz is not real. We're withdrawing that.
And
Yeah.
Paul, you
Yes,
just got
exactly.
on mainstream with Tavis Smiley.
Yeah.
I did, and you know, and speaking of the media, I would have to say that Tavis Smiley's people called me up based on the Al Jazeera America article. And
No
Al
kidding.
Jazeera America actually has been running some really amazing articles about poverty and criminalization. And they did an article on the 125 at that time. Now it's 136 organizations that have banded together in Washington, Colorado, Oregon, and California to do the House Keys Homeless Bill of Rights, House Keys Not Handcuffs campaign. And from that was a ripple effect that led to Tavis Smiley hearing something that I had spoken about in regards to how the war on poverty actually helped to create the homelessness that we saw 20 years after that war was quote unquote declared.
I know.
Um,
I know. They
and
ran me out of
that
the
was
war
the
on poverty.
context. that was the
worked
context for the
for 'em.
show. No, and so did my mom, and I grew up in food co-ops
Yeah.
and alternative high schools, and you know, there wasn't all bad, but there was a foundational underpinning in the war on poverty that said poor people are stupid, poor people need help, poor people need to fit into society. And so and also that by doing, you know, United Way puts out a book called Doing Well by Doing Good that shows these corporations how to set up foundations and make money in the process.
Oh yeah.
And so it's all about, and low-income housing tax credit programs for building affordable housing that's not really affordable anymore.
Oh,
So it's this whole concept of if we can turn other people's poverty into a way of making money, then we can do charity. Charity is profitable. Social justice isn't. Social justice doesn't get United Way any money, so it's not part of the structure in addressing poverty. You know, and it just by virtue of the fact these business improvement districts that were just now created and that use tax dollars to administer all of their programs, they use property tax dollars. The public never voted on it. Only the property owners signed a petition to make it happen. The government, local government, pays property taxes to business improvement districts, and 74% of their money goes to security, and the rest of it goes to lobbying. And so
Wow.
they're able to use tax dollars to lobby. They're able to use tax dollars to implement an economic plan. They're able to use tax dollars to displace people. But nonprofits
And
are
for
not
their own
allowed to talk
security.
about systemic issues.
Right.
If you're a 501c3, you're supposed to be doing charity and shut up when it comes to the greater causes of poverty, the racism and classism that is so inherent in all of these
Endemic.
policies, whether they be our prison industrial complex, our local police, and community police on patrol. What the hell are you kidding? You know, the fact that poor people are seen as inherently dysfunctional.
Oh yeah.
The system is God. The system is good.
I know.
Housing subsidies are good so long as it's going to homeowners or to mortgage companies. You know, but
Exactly.
housing subsidies are bad if it's poor people because poor people are bad. Poor is lacking in quality,
Yeah.
right? That's another
Yeah, you're
definition for
unsuccessful.
poor is
Yeah.
you are lacking quality, you know? So it really stands to reason. If you're rich, that's, you know, rich foam, rich ice cream, rich, you know, it's
know.
it's a
Yeah.
good
I know,
thing.
and American value, capitalist American values, are all about success being material, and it's measured on how much money you earn, or how
And-
much money you have, or how much wealth you have.
And if
And,
it's about, you know, something that none of us need, if it's TV sets, I don't really care whether that's a commodity or not, you know?
Right.
Like, but when you're talking about education, healthcare, housing, what government wouldn't want the people being governed healthy, educated, housed? You know, why
fed,
wouldn't you
and
want
fed.
that?
A
Yeah, and
fascist
fed.
government
You have
that
to look
only
at
wants
food,
them
too.
as
Yeah.
slaves, as wage
As
slaves.
wage slaves, yeah.
Clearly,
Yeah.
clearly,
Yeah.
and
And in many ways,
know?
I've often said that today's wage slavery, both behind the prison walls and outside of the prison walls, not a lot of difference in pay, really,
or in working
or
conditions
in
sometimes.
working conditions. The chattel slavery, and I'm only talking about the more benevolent slave owners. Chattel slavery, at least, because we were owned by the boss, the slaver. We were like his cars. You know, it behooved him to take good care of it. That's his car, so he's going to keep it running. And so they kept us healthy, allowed us to have many kids as we wanted to have because they wanted more slaves. And in many cases, we probably grew our own organic food and so forth and so on. So, but today, wage slavery, they don't pay you enough to even eat.
Nope.
They or put a roof over your head. There are people, homeless people, working full-time jobs
Yeah.
who can't put a roof over their heads, and they're just throwaways. People are just throwaways. They don't care. They don't give you health care. You can't get a doctor if you need it, so forth and so on.
Well, the
So in
Walmart
some ways,
employees-
it's worse than
Yeah.
chattel slavery.
Yeah, the Walmart employees who are collecting food stamps because they don't
Exactly,
make enough to buy
exactly,
food.
exactly. That
I
it's
mean,
insane, and that's the
it really
richest,
is.
largest corporation in the
Yes,
world.
yes.
Makes no sense.
Right.
So we really have a, we really have a battle,
Sick system.
but it's very sick. And I think today, we're witnessing an awakening, an awareness, a consciousness that is happening for any number of reasons that we know that could be spelled the beginning of the end of this capitalist system.
Well,
I certainly
and
hope
coming
so.
coming up from the streets and coming from the houseless perspective, I don't think it didn't just happen. I
No,
think
it didn't.
this has been brewing for a while.
Exactly.
And this has been building for a
Oh,
while.
yes.
And the whole concept around who's repping us and with those that are making decisions, and frankly, who the hell's these people to make those decisions? Has become something that is openly being questioned, and I think a big part of it, because this is something we used to always talk about in the organizing around homelessness. You got nothing to lose, man. You're already ass out.
Everything to gain.
There
and
ain't nothing to lose, so you might
Exactly.
as well turn around and fight back. And if you're sitting there and you're a Native American kid and 75% of your friends have either committed or know someone who's committed suicide, and the other ones are in jail, and if you're a young kid growing up in the city and you see all the displacement that's going on, and you see the lack of living wage jobs, and you see the lack of opportunity, and all your friends are ending up in jail or prison, you got nothing to lose. It's okay now
Really.
to turn around
Really
and
and
say, the hell with you. We ain't taking this no more. We
Yeah.
want our rights. We want a homeless bill of rights. We want whatever
Talk
bill
about
of
the
rights
home-
it is that
before
we're
we run out
talking
of
about.
time, talk about the
We
homeless bill of
feel that
rights.
we need to overturn the anti-Okie laws and the sundown towns and the Jim Crow laws and the ugly laws and the Japanese Exclusion Act and the Bassarero treaties. All of these laws that over periods of time, going back to the late 1800s through obviously the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the ugly law, the final one, wasn't taken off the books. This was a panhandling law for disabled people until the 70s, and Chicago was the last time it was finally taken off the books. We're seeing broken windows policing today, which is just another manifestation of Jim Crow and anti-Okie and sundown town.
Explain
which,
what the broken windows is.
The broken window theory says if you have one person there, even though they're doing something really minor, they're just there, they're sleeping, they're homeless and they're sleeping. If you don't get rid of that one person, the broken window, then you're going to have tons of broken windows because it's going to attract more people like that. And they're going to do even more dangerous things, and the whole community is going to go to hell in a handbasket. So the enforcement of panhandling and jaywalking, subway fare evasions, the whole policing of your appearance, your existence is what is offensive. And the judges, the courts now call them nuisance crimes. So you're not even a real crime anymore. It's a nuisance crime. It's leading to people getting shot, getting choked to
know.
death.
I know.
It's about command and control, and it's police on steroids. And it's a manifestation of the business improvement district guys talk about creating the safe shopping mall environment in downtown corridors. So nobody wants to live in the freaking suburbs anymore, and they're moving into the cities. They're gentrifying the cities, but they want that same safe, sanitized environment for shopping that existed at the malls. And you didn't see people sleeping in the malls.
Right.
You know, that didn't happen. That's private property. You ain't sleeping here. Security kick you out. Well, now our neighborhoods have become private property, and the policing aspect is if you're there, it's a problem. And if you're sitting, standing, that's loitering, blocking the sidewalk, if you're laying down, if you're sleeping, if you're eating, all of those are criminal offenses.
Right.
And I have the legal authority to remove you from where you are because we don't want to see you there anymore.
Right.
That's Jim Crow. That's sundown town.
Yeah, and what we're seeing happen in a lot of neighborhoods now is when they propose these new construction sites with multi-million-dollar condos and stuff like at 16th and Mission, they're proposing to build 350 market rate condos. Well, it's no coincidence that as soon as they announced that, suddenly you had this clean up the plaza campaign popping out of thin air. You had these posters going up in store windows and stuff that say clean up the plaza, referring to 16th and Mission.
Referring to the people. Referring to the people that are at 16th and Mission.
Exactly. And suddenly you had more police presence there. You had more people being hassled. And it's no coincidence. And,
no, of course
the developer at one point denied it because we raised the issue. I'm part of the Plaza 16 coalition, and we are opposed to that construction, and we're going to fight it, and we're going to win. We're going to stop that construction somehow. But we raised the issue. We said, why is it suddenly there's this clean up the plaza campaign when there's an announcement that they're going to build these market rate condos? Is the developer behind this campaign? Well, it turned out that the PR guy for the developer, his roommate, is one of the people who started this campaign. Wow, what a coincidence. There's no connection with the developer, but the developer denies it publicly. He's been asked, and the developer is saying, no, we have nothing to do with this campaign.
It's just incredible, isn't it?
It is. But clearly it doesn't. Clearly this happens every time you have these market rate developments proposed in these neighborhoods. Suddenly you have more police. You suddenly want to clean up people. You want to push people out that live there, that have lived there for a long time. That's their neighborhood, but they want to push them out because they want to move in these people who are going to be uncomfortable.
And what the Homeless Bill of Rights does is says it's pushing state laws to be passed, state legislation to be passed in California and Oregon for sure, probably Colorado for this upcoming session. It says local governments will no longer have the authority, the legal authority, to criminalize activities that everybody's going to do. Everyone's going to sleep, housed or unhoused. Everyone's going to go to the bed. Everyone's going to do these things. Everyone's going to eat. Everyone's going to lay down. So it can't be possible it would not be possible anymore if these bills pass to criminalize activities that damn well when you write the law, everyone's going to have to do it whether they like to or not. And that way, if they want to clean up the plaza and they can't criminalize the presence of poor people being in the plaza, grab a broom and start sweeping. I got no problem with that whatsoever. You want to clean it up? Go for it, brother. But if you think that your version of gentrifying a neighborhood or beautifying a community or cleaning up a plaza is to remove the presence of human beings that you find offensive, then you and I are going to have a problem.
Right. Now let's talk a little bit about the beginning. I'm flashing back on when Silent Sam, who was the housing czar, what do they call it? What's the cabinet minister?
HUD, the HUD director,
head of HUD, under Reagan, cut the budget. I think something like 27 or more.
No, $54 billion.
54 billion.
In 2004 constant dollars. But it's the equivalent of $54 billion a year was eliminated within 2 years. And then a little bit of that was restored, and the actual what's spent versus 79 when the cut started, from 79 to 82 they eliminated over $54 billion a year in affordable housing funding. And now it's gone back up to, it went down to 18 billion. Now it's gone back up to between 37 and 34 billion dollars a year in affordable housing funding.
Okay,
so the equivalent is about 50.
I want to talk about the economics of homelessness. First of all, as you well know, they've institutionalized it, which so homelessness itself costs a ton of money, and and Utah, I understand, decided to solve the homeless problem with a very simple remedy: build housing, put them in
Utah
houses.
did not build housing. Utah got housing vouchers from HUD to use VA support services money and HUD housing vouchers to house 1,000 veterans. Calling it Housing First. Housing First is a tagline. There's no budget attached to the tagline of Housing First. It's a great concept. We've been pushing for Housing First. There's pictures of us in demos with the Homeless Caucus in 1983 calling for housing.
Let me just finish what I heard was their thought, and then I want you to rebut it. But what the idea was that homeless was costing them too much money because people were frequenting the emergency rooms too often. It was costing them a mint in medical bills. So go from there.
No, that's the same justification they use for chronic homeless programs, Housing First, chronic homeless initiatives. It's all based on SRO hotels that are master leased, taken off the open market. So you get one group of poor people that are kicked out of these SRO hotels. They then move in some specified. In Utah's case, it was veterans was the primary target population. Sometimes it's chronic homeless. It's never families. Just know that across the board. Nowhere are they talking about ending homelessness by housing families. It's always single adults because it's 10 cents on the dollar to do a single adult over doing a family. And so you see a ton of SRO buildings in San Francisco that have been emptied out of the poor people that used to live there that are now homeless program buildings. And they're using housing subsidies to get and master lease those buildings and to get into those buildings. So it's this bizarre, just like they're going to start using project-based Section 8 certificates and public housing units, or they're using Section 8 vouchers and low-income housing tax credit programs. They're so unwilling to actually address the issue of refunding affordable housing funding that they're having to match and piggyback and create all these little specialized programs and give them taglines like Housing First. Of course, Housing First is a great tagline. It makes perfect sense when you're talking about houselessness. Right. Housing is a pretty good answer to homelessness. Yeah. I tell you, it's the number one answer I've ever heard about.
And we got about a minute left, unfortunately.
And so we're all for the idea. It's the pretense that we have a real attitude about.
Okay, well, let me give each of you about 20 seconds.
Okay, so fund the revolution by buying a book. That's the way that this is going to work. You're going to fund the revolution because you're going to buy Rap's book at our website, WRAPHOME.org.
All right.
And as far as I'm concerned, the bottom line, the goal has to be to take the land back. Take it away from the people who profit off of it because it is not their land to be making a profit off of. And until we, the people, because the land doesn't belong to anybody, it belongs to everyone and nobody.
Right.
So we got to take the land back. And the land has to be for all of us. We got to house everybody, and this profit thing has to go. Housing is not a commodity. Housing is not about profit.
It's a human right.
It's a human right, damn it.
Yes.
And that's what we got to insist on.
Yes.
All of our work has to be about that. That's the
all
goal,
power to the people
to take
and
housing back and take the land back.
And thank you, Paul Boden and Tommi Aviolli Mecca, and thank you.
Thank you,
Andrew
Q.
Montoya, and
Andrew.
thank you, viewers, for tuning in to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. I'm Kilu Nyasha. Come back January 15th.
Great. Thank